Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, John Barker. And John's just coming in from the legislative sessions and comes in, and this is why we call the show Legislative Updates, because John comes in and he always brings a special guest with him, or frequently does, and he has today. This is Jim Denning in the middle, and Jim's a Senate Majority Leader, and from the 8th District out of Overland Park.
That's correct. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you being here. And you know, you got quite a trip to go, and I'm glad you came in. You're going to spend some time with the Barkers and to go out to the farmhouse and grab some chicken, and that's a good place to eat. We were out there on Valentine's Day, and the place was packed.
There you go.
So, John, tell me, we're coming up on, you call it something about 45 days.
Turnaround.
Turnaround.
This is where the bills that were introduced in January and the first part of February, they have to leave their House of Origin, which means all the House bills need to leave and go to the Senate, and all the Senate bills need to leave the Senate and come to the House, the ones that have been worked on the floor. Of course, there are some exceptions to that for what we call the exempt committees, and there's 3 of those: appropriations in the House, tax, and federal and state affairs. So I anticipate next week, Monday is the last day non-exempt committees can work their bills. So they will try to kick out as many bills as they can, and then we go on the floor on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We'll go on the floor early. We'll go into the committee of the whole. We will debate those bills. Some of them will get amended, and then we will pass them out. And then probably the following day, we will go to final action, where we actually vote on the bills officially, and then pass them over to the Senate. And then we take off about 3 or 4 days to give the staffs an opportunity to move those bills from the House to the Senate and the Senate bills over to the House, get those bills in the computer, and they'll get assigned out to committees. And like the ones that come over from Fed State, I'll probably get, and I may get a few more. And then I'll be considering the Senate bills, but I also, because I am an exempt committee, I can still work House bills. In fact, we went on the committee of the whole 3 days this week, and we've passed out about 11 bills. And then we had some on the consent calendar that just automatically passed out. If no one brings them off the consent calendar, they stand there for 3 days, and then we go to final action. And I'm just glad Jim could come out. We have nice weather today.
Yeah,
we had him scheduled about 3 weeks ago, and the snowstorm, the ice storm hit. And so we always enjoy having Jim out, and he's here to talk about the Senate, which is different than the House, although we all work together. We have to kind of coordinate, and Jim's responsible for that, coordinating with the House leadership on how we do certain bills. So he's one of them, what I always call one of them important people up in the Senate. Not in the House, but in the Senate. But he used to be in the House, so he's House trained.
I remember that about it. It's kind of unique from the standpoint, Jim, that when you first went in as a representative, and then you came back in as in the Senate, and have been there since.
Right. I served my first 2 years in the House, and I'm finishing up my 8th year in the Senate this year.
Wow. And you're Senate Majority Leader.
Correct. I've been Senate Majority Leader. This is my 4th year.
What does that mean, to be Senate Majority Leader?
The Majority Leader's job, for the most part, is to keep the bills. Once the committees pass out a bill, it comes to what we call the calendar, and then the Majority Leader's main job is to organize which bills come above the line for debate and which bills need to stay below the line. There's about probably 60% of the bills have a hearing, get to the calendar, and then we pass those on for full debate. There's a handful of bills, probably 10-15%, that we think that probably would be best if they didn't get a hearing or debated, and we let those bills, what we call, die.
So they don't get on the calendar.
He's got an important job because he's managing everything, and he has to speculate, okay, how long is this bill going to take for the debate? Some bills take longer than others, and the Majority Leader makes all those decisions.
And sometimes a bill will have, once it comes through committee, and even though it's been vetted, when you take a look at it, you'll think that it may have an unintended consequence that's not good for the state, and we just leave that bill set right there and let it expire.
Will they have started in some sort of a committee and before you ever see them?
It's very rare for a bill to come straight to the floor. It might happen once a session, and that would be a rarity, but usually the bills get all worked in the committee and vetted, and then they come to the floor for full debate.
Okay.
And those bills that are not debated on the floors are then lost. For example, we may have passed out 100 bills in the House. If it did not come above the line and it did not get debated and passed out, then at the end of turnaround, they just go away.
They're just dropped off and they're done for
now,
that.
the Speaker does
term.
have the authority, and I think the Senate President has the authority to send those bills to an exempt committee and then bring them back, and they're called blessed then because they've come to a non-exempt committee. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right, we're going to cut away and take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker from 70th District. And as you know, with the Legislative Updates, John comes in every Friday after the legislature breaks for the day and comes in and gives us the most current information. And today he's brought a special guest, Jim Denning, Senate Majority Leader. So, Jim, what's going on in the Senate? What are you working on?
Well, the major bills that the Senate and the House are working on this year, there's several really big, important pieces of legislation. The ones that come top of mind right now would be, we have a constitutional amendment that we're debating on the right for the legislature to continue to regulate abortion regulations. Our Supreme Court back in April of 19 made a decision on Senate Bill 95. They declared it unconstitutional. And in that ruling, which is called the Hodes ruling, Hodes, it was undetermined if the Supreme Court in Kansas had just ruled Senate Bill 95 as unconstitutional, but there was some gray area where some folks think that they also may be saying that the state has to use public funds to pay for an abortion. And obviously there's no support for public taxpayer funds to pay for an abortion, especially an elective abortion. So there is a constitutional amendment being debated to have it in the Constitution that the legislators have the ability to regulate abortion and that no state tax money can be used for an abortion other than the safety of the mother and instances of rape and incest, which is known as the Hyde Amendment, which is a federal rule that almost every state follows. So the gray area caused the constitutional amendment to be developed, and we're debating it right now. It takes 2/3 a majority to pass a bill that is a constitutional amendment. The Senate passed it with 28 votes. We needed 27. So we easily passed it with one to spare. It got to the House, and the House needs 84 votes, and they were 4 votes short. So that means when they took the constitutional amendment across their floor, it failed. And now it's back on their calendar for further debate. We're trying to figure out what everybody needs for 4 more votes. So there's 2 things in play. One is more of just a data-driven question, and I have a graph that I brought to talk about that. And then the other issue is there are some House members that want the constitutional amendment to show up in August of 20, which is the primary election. There's some that want the constitutional amendment to show up in November of 20, which is the general election. And there's another subgroup that would like it as its own election in April of 21. So the House leadership, and with the help of the Senate leadership, we're just talking to every member over in the House to see which way would they want to go to end up with 84 votes or 4 votes short. On the data side, it's an easy discussion. This graph is tiny, but there's only 2 points that I want to make reference to. This large blue line down here, that is 33,000 patients, and those 33,000 patients are sitting on what's called the exchange. That's the Obamacare exchange. And there's another piece of legislation which is referred to as Medicaid expansion, but it's more of a health policy bill than, it's way more than Medicaid expansion. But nevertheless, there are some folks that when they saw that 33,000 patients could come over to Medicaid if Kansas would expand Medicaid, they thought that the abortion rate would increase significantly. So when we drilled down of the females in the ages of 19 and 44, which is the reproductive age range, and looked at the Kansas pregnancy rate is 6.47% in that range, you can see this large line, which is 33,000, and then this tiny line there, that's 315. So the concern of 33,000 coming over quickly goes to 315. So I think that will ease everybody's angst about the Medicaid expansion discussion.
And of course, we have that chart, the PowerPoint that you have, we have that on the screen so that they were able to see that. Now, go ahead, Jim, did you have something else?
So we call it, two great, big, important policies that we need to pass. And they're like two big elephants in the room, and the doorways only has room for one. So we have two big policies that are somewhat colliding with each other, and we have to get one cleared before the other one will clear. Some folks want Medicaid expansion to clear first. Others want the abortion amendment to clear first. So right now we're at a stalemate until the legislators, they'll have to decide as a body which one goes first. And right now most legislators would prefer the abortion amendment to go first. So that's where we are with that particular piece of legislation.
And that's the reason things are kind of slowed down.
It has slowed down.
But they could pick up at any time.
I've noticed the last 2 or 3 days of work has really picked up.
It has. We've been on general orders. I think you were on general orders yesterday.
We were, and we're going back on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We'll probably clear between 30 and 40 bills in the next 2 or 3 days.
That's probably about, the House may do a few more, but not many more than that.
General orders, what does that mean?
That means that we've taken the bills that were, if this was the calendar, we would simply draw a line right here. Bills below the line will not get debated, and when we want to debate a bill, we simply move it above the line, and those become the bills that we debate.
Okay.
And here's a document. It's called Kansas House General Orders. It's, you can see it's quite a few pages. You can go through every bill that's been passed out of committee, and then the leadership decides each day, and Jim on the Senate side, of what we call above the line. And what's above the line gets debated, and if passed in the committee of the whole, then the next day, or you can go to emergency final action, and then actually vote on the bills as they are, and then there's no debate at that point. And then once they're passed, they get sent to the Senate, or the Senate sends them to the House. Right. But it's a document we pick up every time we go on general orders to see what, as a committee chair, I look at all my bills that are here, and I'm knowing that, not in my case, but if you're a non-exempt committee, that if I can't get those bills above the line and get debated, they're going to go away. And a lot of work has been lost.
Right.
All right. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker from the 70th District, and our special guest, Jim Denning, Senate Majority Leader. And this Friday afternoon, we're getting an update from it. So, guys, where do you want to go to from here?
Jim?
I can jump in and talk about a few more big pieces of policy that we've been working on. One piece is familiar with almost everybody in the state of Kansas, and it's our teachers and public sector pension retirement plan. It's known as KPRs. We've been working on KPRs really hard for the last 8 years. When we came into the legislature 8 years ago, the KPRs plan was almost bankrupt. It was less than 50% funded, and we directed lots of monetary resources to it and changed some plan designs. Now we have KPRs up to where it's almost 70% funded, which is still cautionary, but way better than it was when we started. And with the economy so robust from the Trump economy, where our receipts are exceeding our estimates. So what I look to happen this year to shore up KPRs even further is that there's a note receivable that the state owes KPRs from a missed payment a couple of years ago, actually 2 missed payments, and those total $268 million. I look for the legislature. I think the House will go first on this and actually take the lead, and we'll have legislation to pay off that $268 million this year rather than over the next 19 years.
Man, that's tremendous. $268 million?
Yeah.
And you'll be able to catch it up this year.
We'll be able to pay the whole entire note receivable off, and 2 important things. One, over the remaining 19 years, we will save $209 million in interest.
Because we're paying 8% interest, because that's the assumed rate. It really dropped down to 7.5, but at the time we actually missed the payments, it was 8%. So 8% we've been paying on this money. You know, you can't not put your money into KPRs. That's federal law. So when we miss a payment, it's a loan. It's not a missed payment that we can just put back in. We have to actually pay the
Borrow and
interest
pay
rate.
interest on it.
Right.
Borrow and pay interest.
And you know, over the years, John, that we've been doing this, that's been one of the questions that people often ask. Will there be KPRs when I get ready to retire? And that's a question that we hear a lot.
Yeah, we do, and I've served on the KPRs committee for several years, and I remember those days when we were one of the 3rd or 4th worst pension plans in the country, and now we're getting up to 68%, almost 70%. If you get to 80 or 85%, you can assume that you could make that assumption that you're fully funded. But I believe KPRs will be there. I see no reason. The state has an obligation to pay that, but it's a very sensitive issue.
It is, and with all the commitments that we've made to KPRs, it's very solid. I think folks should be very comfortable knowing that their KPRs will be there. The governor, this is the 2nd year in a row that she's proposed re-amortizing KPRs, and the legislature knocked it down last year, that is to say, denied it, and I'm sure this year they will deny it as well. The re-amortizing KPRs will eventually happen. That's how actuarial work is required, but it's about 2 or 3 years too early. Just to put it into perspective, the closer we can get to 2024 before we re-amortize, the better. So that's the goal that I'm looking for, is not to re-amortize before 2024.
And there'll be many members of the governor's party that will vote against her on this.
This year
they did
will.
last year, they will this year, because it's not a good time to do that. The board of directors can do that on their own without her permission, but they want to wait for the right time.
Yep. And then the other piece that's somewhat tied to KPRs is that over the last several years, when we had our budget problems, we had started transferring highway funds out of the highway fund for roads into our budget fund to pay for our bills. And again, with the Trump economy and everything that we've done, the economy is generating more income than we estimated. So the governor transferred $158 million out of the highway fund into her budget fund, and I look for the legislature to pass legislation to transfer that $158 million back to the highway fund.
Right. And could you touch on the EROs?
Yeah, the EROs, they're executive reorganizations. The governor has given us 3. One is the Department of Aging and Disability, and then the other is Children and Families. They're very big agencies, and she's proposing to put them together. And right now, it's not getting well received in the legislature at all. Our thinking is we've never seen government work when it's even larger than it is now. So if you take one big agency and the second big agency and put them together, we think there'll be more inefficiencies from that than efficiency.
Right.
So,
and we had that with SRS.
We've been there before.
We've been there before, and they didn't work, so we broke them down to the smaller units.
Right.
So you could manage them.
We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to our final segment of legislative updates. My name's Doug Thompson, co-host John Barker. In the middle is Jim Denning, Senate Majority Leader. First off, Jim, thank you so much for coming out, sharing the information. It is worth gold to be able to have Senate Majority Leader, Representative come out and share this information each week, because you read it in the press or you read it somewhere else or you get the information secondhand, but you guys share it, and we appreciate that.
Happy to help.
John, next week, who are you going to be bringing with you?
We're going to have the Chairman of Appropriations in the House, Troy Waymaster. He's from the Russell area. He was on before, I think a year or so back. And I was just talking with Jim. I said, trying to get him scheduled back at maybe the end before we go our first adjournment, so he can come back out. And by that time, we'll have a few more answers.
We will.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. We'll have to do it again later in the season.
Right.
Thanks for watching. See you next time on Legislative Updates.